Don Rickles built his entire career on roasting anyone who crossed his path. No one was too powerful, too ordinary, or too untouchable to escape his razor-sharp tongue. Presidents, movie stars, singers, even his closest friends, everyone eventually, felt the sting of his humor. And that's exactly what audiences adored about him. Yet here's the twist. For all the insults he unleashed on stage, Rickles rarely carried that venom off it. Most of the people he mocked he genuinely adored. Many of the so-called enemies he made, he laughed with backstage. But there was one man who struck a nerve deeper than anyone else. This wasn't light-hearted teasing or a passing annoyance. This was different, real, personal, and bitter. For once, Don Rickles wasn't joking. He truly despised this man. So who was the unlucky figure the king of insult comedy couldn't stand? And what happened between them that left Rickles unwilling to forgive? To understand that story, we need to look at the making of Don Rickles himself. Comedy wasn't something he stumbled into. It was something he clawed his way toward piece by piece, from a childhood that looked nothing like the glittering stages he would one day dominate. Born in Queens, New York, on May 8, 1926, Rickles was the only child in a Jewish household where Yiddish filled the air. His father, Max, had emigrated from Kiss, Lithuania, back in 1903, while his mother, Ada, was a true New Yorker, the daughter of Austrian immigrants. They settled in Jackson Heights, and that's where little Don grew up, immersed in old-world traditions, but already looking toward something larger than the world he knew. By the time he graduated from Newtown High, school in 1944, the world was in turmoil. Like so many young men of his generation, Rickles enlisted. He joined the U.S. Navy, serving as a seaman first class on the USS Cyrene, a motor torpedo boat tender constantly exposed to danger on open seas. 2 years later, he was honorably discharged. The Navy had toughened him, but it didn't define him. Don Rickles wasn't cut out for a life in uniform. He was destined for the spotlight. At first, though, he didn't dream of making people laugh. He wanted to move them. In 1948, determined to become a serious Shakespearean actor, he enrolled at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. He imagined himself embodying kings, tragic heroes, and tortured souls. But Hollywood wasn't buying it. The roles never came. Instead, Rickles was left with minor parts and endless frustration. That frustration, however, sparked the shift that changed his life. When acting dried up, he began performing in nightclubs across New York, Miami, and Los Angeles. His routines didn't land with much force, but his interactions with hecklers did. Instead of brushing them off, he fired back, slicing through them with razor wit. The audience roared. The insults hit harder, funnier, and more explosively than anything he had prepared. So Rickles leaned into it. The insults became the act. If someone in the crowd was too loud, too cocky, or simply sitting there with the wrong expression, Rickles zeroed in. It was brutal, fearless, and absolutely hilarious. Soon, audiences weren't showing up for his prepared jokes. They were hoping for hecklers just to watch Rickles go to work. That's when the legend of Don Rickles, insult comic, was born. By the early 1950s, he had even coined his signature insult, hockey puck. If you were arrogant, clueless, or just unlucky enough to catch his eye, you became one. The phrase stuck, and so did he. Some compared his style to Jack E. Leonard, another insult comic who came before him. Rickles brushed off the comparison, insisting his rhythm was his own. If anything, he credited Milton Berle, the legendary TV comic who opened the doors of show business for so many, with inspiring him to believe comedy could be a way up, a way out, and a path to the life he wanted. Rickles never became the Shakespearean actor he once dreamed of. Instead, he became something rarer, the man who could walk into a room full of presidents, movie stars, and even mob bosses, and tear them down with a grin. But talent alone wasn't enough. The true turning point in his career came from one chance encounter. If Don Rickles had a rocket strapped to his back, Frank Sinatra was the man who lit the fuse. It happened in Miami Beach at a small nightclub called Murray Franklin's. Rickles, still hustling to make a name for himself, spotted Sinatra in the audience. Sinatra was a man both revered and feared, the last person most comics would dare to cross. But Rickles didn't flinch. He looked him dead in the eye and quipped that he'd just seen the pride and the passion and thought the Cannon's acting was better than Sinatra's. Then, with that trademark smirk, he added, "Make yourself at home, Frank. Hit somebody." For most comics, that would have been career suicide. But Sinatra loved it. He nicknamed Rickles Bullethead and became his biggest fan. And in Sinatra's world, that was a golden ticket. He didn't just laugh, he evangelized. He told other celebrities they had to see Rickles, had to sit in the front row, had to get insulted. That endorsement transformed Rickles from another struggling nightclub act into a bona fide headliner in Las Vegas. Once Rickles hit the Strip, he didn't just perform, he owned it. Don Rickles made his name by tearing people down, yet somehow earned the warmest nicknames of all, the Merchant of Venom and Mr. Warmth. It was the perfect contradiction. He could roast you alive and still make you love him for it. Whenever he stepped onto the stage, the band would strike up the Spanish matador anthem, La Virgen de la Macarena. It was Rickles' way of saying, "I'm the matador, you're the bull, and tonight you're getting gored." And the crowd couldn't wait. But Rickles' career wasn't built on live insults alone. He was climbing the Hollywood ladder as well. In 1958, he surprised audiences by making his film debut not in a comedy, but in a serious role alongside Clark Gable and Burt Lancaster in Run Silent, Run Deep. It was a reminder that Rickles had always seen himself as an actor first, even if comedy had claimed him. Through the 1960s, he bounced between sitcoms and dramas, proving his range. He appeared in Get Smart as an old war buddy of Maxwell Smart, and in Run for Your Life he played a tormented comedian whose act ended with him strangling an audience member while screaming for them to laugh. Dark, twisted, and far ahead of its time. He even dipped into B-movie territory, starring in Roger Corman's sci-fi horror flick X, The Man with the X-Ray Eyes, where he played a sleazy carnival barker exploiting a man cursed with the power to see through everything. It was cheap, campy, and unforgettable. Then came the beach party films, sunny, goofy teen musicals with Annette Funicello and Frankie Avalon. Rickles later joked in his memoir that Barbara Bush once teased him at a White House dinner about appearing in them. He laughed it off. After all, it was hard to embarrass a man who had built his empire on insulting others. Television, however, was where Rickles truly found his rhythm. By 1965, he had become a regular on The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson, racking up more than 100 appearances during Carson's reign. He wasn't just a guest. Sometimes he filled in as host. His chemistry with Carson was electric. One classic moment came in 1968 when Carson was being pampered on set by two Japanese women, giving him a bath and foot massage. Rickles casually strolled in, instantly derailing the scene and sending the studio into chaos. That was Rickles. Always one beat ahead, always ready to explode the moment. He became a fixture on the Dean Martin Show and, of course, the legendary Dean Martin. Celebrity roasts. Nothing suited him better than a stage full of stars waiting to be skewered. He roasted Sinatra. He roasted Martin. And eventually, he became the target himself, taking the insults as gracefully as he dished them out. In 1968, he captured his act for the masses with a live comedy album, Hello Dummy, which cracked the Billboard charts at number 54, a rare feat for a stand-up record. That same year, he tried hosting his own variety series, The Don Rickles Show, with comedy writer Pat McCormack as his sidekick. It lasted only 17 episodes before being replaced by Let's Make a Deal, but Rickles hardly needed it. By then, he was everywhere. Guest spots piled up across the decade. The Dick Van Dyke Show, The Munsters, The Addams Family, Gilligan's Island, The Mothers-in-Law, The Andy Griffith Show, Gomer Pyle, USMC, and I Dream of Jeannie. And who could forget his appearance in the Twilight Zone episode Mr. Dingle the Strong, opposite Burgess Meredith. Rickles wasn't just a comedian. He was an entertainer who could slip into any world, bend to any genre, and still leave his fingerprints all over it. By the end of the 1960s, Don Rickles had become more than Sinatra's wisecracking sidekick. He was a Las Vegas headliner, a Hollywood regular, and one of the most recognizable faces on television. The kid from Jackson Heights who once dreamed of Shakespearean tragedy had found his stage and was rewriting comedy history one insult at a time. Yet there was one person Rickles never roasted, the great love of his life. He met Barbara Sklar while she was working as a secretary for his agent. Unlike many Hollywood romances, theirs wasn't instant fireworks. They went on a few dates, and what hooked Don wasn't her laughter at his jokes, but the fact that she didn't always get them. She admitted she didn't quite understand his brand of insult-driven humor, and for a man whose career depended on people getting it, her honesty stopped him in his tracks. Rickles later said that was when he fell in love. On March 14, 1965, they married, beginning a union that would last 52 years. Just weeks before his death, they celebrated their anniversary, and Don's final tweet was a heartfelt tribute to Barbara, a simple, sincere gesture from a man known for sarcasm. For Rickles, sincerity spoke louder than any joke. He often admitted his romantic life hadn't been smooth in his younger years. Marriage didn't come until he was 38, and by then, he knew what he wanted. When asked about the secret to a lasting marriage, Rickles once joked the answer was a hooker, before dropping the punchline and clarifying that what truly kept their bond strong was friendship and the ability to talk about anything. Together, Don and Barbara had 2 children, Larry and Mindy. Larry Rickles built a respected career, behind the camera, winning an Emmy in 2008 for producing HBO's Mr. Warmth, The Don Rickles Project, a documentary about his father that blended rare home videos with tributes from friends and colleagues. Larry began his career in the mid-90s through a Warner Brothers workshop program before landing a writing job on the CBS sitcom Murphy Brown. But tragedy struck in 2011 when Larry passed away at just 41 from respiratory failure caused by pneumonia. It was a devastating loss for the Rickles family. Mindy, much like her father, felt an early pull toward performance. She began her acting career in the late 1980s, first appearing on Newhart in 1988. From there, she landed a series of roles across television throughout the early 1990s. In 2013, she shared the screen with Jeff Garland in the film Dealing with Idiots. Today, she performs as a stand-up comedian in clubs around Southern California. In a bittersweet twist of fate, she had been scheduled to appear at the Laugh Factory in Hollywood on the very night her father passed away. Barbara, though she preferred a private life, was never completely absent from the public eye. She made an appearance on This Is Your Life in 1972, featured in her son's HBO documentary, and even joined Don for guest spots on Kathy Griffin's My Life on the D-List. The couple also appeared together during the 1983 TV special, George. Burns celebrates 80 years in show business, where they reflected on Burns's remarkable influence on entertainment. Barbara may never have sought out the spotlight, but whenever she did step in front of a camera, she came across as authentic, gracious, grounded, and quietly commanding. One of Don's most enduring friendships was with Bob Newhart. On the surface, the two seemed mismatched. Rickles, brash and biting, paired with Newhart, soft-spoken and dryly deadpan. Yet beneath that contrast, they were inseparable. Don once described their bond as apples and oranges, he, the loud Jew, and Bob, the quiet Catholic. What truly tied them together, however, were their shared values, commitment to marriage, family, and grandchildren. They traveled the world with their wives and, remarkably, never once had a serious argument. Though life brought sadness, they always found laughter together, and their friendship often spilled onto the stage. They roasted each other mercilessly, whether in live performances or on television. When Newhart celebrated his 50th year in show business, Rickles introduced him, with a trademark barb calling him a hamburger with mayonnaise on white bread. After Don's passing, the Newharts admitted in a statement that they were devastated and at a complete loss, mourning not only a legendary comedian, but also a beloved friend. Despite the glamour of Hollywood, Don and Barbara lived much of their marriage according to the rhythms of his career. Barbara frequently adapted her schedule to fit his, joining him on set and sharing meals on location, even at odd hours. That steady presence kept them close, even when show business created physical distance. Don often credited Barbara for grounding him. He once told the New York Times that she was level-headed and gracious, qualities he admitted he sometimes lacked. He called her his rock and even credited her with saving his life once while filming Casino in 1996. To Don, Barbara was private, calming, and exactly what he needed. He put it bluntly, marrying her was like marrying a Valium. She never sought public adoration, but she embodied everything he valued: loveliness, grace, and endless patience. For a man larger than life on stage, Barbara was the anchor that kept him steady. If Barbara represented calm in Rickles' storm, the comedy world was where the thunder struck hardest, and sometimes closest to home. Don Rickles and Johnny Carson appeared inseparable on television, partners in mischief and chaos on late-night TV. Yet one night, a broken cigarette box nearly shattered their friendship. When Carson returned from a night off, he noticed something wrong with his desk. The cigarette box he had cherished for years, an heirloom he had brought from New York to Los Angeles, was cracked and broken. Shocked, Carson demanded answers. Bandleader Doc Severinsen wasted no time pointing to Rickles. While the audience roared, Carson was not amused. Doc explained that Rickles had been fooling around during a guest-hosted episode with Bob Newhart, pounding Carson's desk in one of his manic fits, and had accidentally broken the box. That was the last straw. Carson clipped on a microphone, grabbed the broken box, and stormed out of his studio during his own live show. A camera crew followed him as the audience howled with delight. He barged into the taping of CPO Sharkey, where Rickles was mid-scene. Carson burst through the doors, box in hand, demanding to know what had happened. The sitcom cast froze. Rickles, suddenly nervous, doubled over with laughter as Carson waved the box like a piece of incriminating evidence. "They told me you broke it," Carson barked. Rickles, sweating, tried to joke it off, mumbling about giving the broken box to Tony. Randall, but Carson pressed harder. He even went so far as to mock the sitcom's chances of survival and threw a cutting remark at Rickles' black co-star, Harrison Page, warning him to keep a cotton mill ready if the show flopped. Sharp and uncomfortable, it was Carson at his most ruthless. Rickles eventually promised to fix the situation, and Carson, still glaring, walked out. The feud became legendary, but so did the box. 2 years later, Rickles was guest hosting The Tonight Show with Carol O'Connor as his guest. In another manic burst, he began slamming Carson's desk before suddenly freezing. The box was still there. Rickles picked it up with reverence, held it aloft like a sacred relic, and began chanting over it as though he were blessing it. With the solemn expression of a priest, he turned to O'Connor and deadpanned that when Carson died, he would bury him in the box. The moment cemented the box not only as a prop, but as a running joke between the two men. But the truth about Rickles was simple. No one was ever safe. Not Sinatra, not Reagan, not Carson, and certainly not the Beatles. On Valentine's Day, 1964 in Miami, the Fab Four had just come off their historic Ed Sullivan Show appearance. They slipped into the Deauville Hotel to watch Rickles perform, unaware of what was about to hit them. Ringo later recalled the experience vividly. Rickles was tearing into the crowd at machine gun speed, interrogating guests about where they were from, and then turning their answers into weapons. Someone from Israel? He snapped before spinning toward another from Germany. Nazi! Get out! What the hell is this? The audience erupted in laughter at the audacity. Then Rickles turned his fire on the Beatles. Paul remembered sitting at a table with their police bodyguard, the man assigned to follow them everywhere. Rickles zeroed in on him first. Hey, cop, get a job. What's this? Looking after the Beatles? Great gig you got, man. The audience howled. And then he smirked. The Beatles? Rickles didn't let up. He mimed the Beatles as though they were boys lying in satin sheets on the 9th floor, moaning every time they heard girls screaming outside. The audience roared with laughter, but the Beatles sat stone-faced. We were not amused, Paul later admitted. Very cutting. I like him now, but at the time he was a bit of a shock. The band didn't stay for the entire show. Maybe they were busy, or maybe they simply didn't want to become the butt of jokes for another hour. Whatever the reason, they left. Rickles, however, remembered it differently in his memoir. For him, the Beatles showing up was pure electricity. The lounge was jammed with people who pressed in just to catch a glimpse of them at a table. The minute John and George walked in, the place erupted. But as quickly as they appeared, they disappeared. They waved, posed for a few photographs, and slipped away. The crowd followed. Rickles stood on stage, microphone in hand, watching the room empty out around him. The Beatles had stolen his thunder without even striking a chord. I was up there, entertaining me, he later wrote. The Beatles had walked out, the crowd had trailed after them, and Don Rickles had been left telling jokes to no one. And yet, that was the essence of Rickles. He didn't mind being abandoned. He thrived on tension, discomfort, and unpredictability. Years later, that same instinct to cut down giants followed him to movie sets. If rock legends could walk out on him, Hollywood royalty could just as easily be deflated. One such target was Robert De Niro, one of the most respected actors in film history, a man who disappeared into roles with methodical precision, a monument to craft and discipline. Yet even De Niro, with all his gravitas, couldn't escape Rickles' relentless ribbing. On the set of Martin Scorsese's Casino in 1995, De Niro wasn't only playing Sam Ace Rothstein, he was also Rickles' favorite punching bag. Rickles, the undisputed king of insult comedy, didn't just arrive on set to act, he came to stir chaos. Armed with razor-sharp wit and biting humor, he zeroed in on De Niro with merciless teasing, the kind he usually reserved for live audiences. De Niro might have been Scorsese's leading man, carrying the weight of the crime drama, but to Rickles, he was just another unlucky soul waiting to be roasted. Actor Kevin Pollak, also part of the Casino cast, later described the chaos on the Rich Eisen show. He recalled how De Niro would be mid-performance, deep in character, delivering lines with his trademark intensity, while Rickles' character had no lines at all, just silence. Then, right in the middle of a take, Rickles would break that silence. Staring at De Niro, he'd quip, "That's the way you're going to do it? Really? You got the award? Sure. But you know what? You're doing bad. Imagine it." There was De Niro, dead serious and sweating under Scorsese's direction, while Rickles, with nothing to do, hijacked the scene just to needle him. According to Pollak, this happened constantly. Rickles would heckle, break in, then walk away without missing a beat, leaving De Niro no choice but to take it. Why didn't De Niro fight back? Because he idolized Rickles. Pollak explained it perfectly. When De Niro was a kid in New York, there were two tribes, the Do Kids, who sang harmonies under streetlights, and the Put-Down Kids, who sharpened their humor by tearing each other apart. De Niro was a put-down kid. To him, Don Rickles was the North Star. He was God. When Rickles realized this, he knew he had a free pass. "I own this guy," he bragged to Pollak. And on set, he proved it every single day. It was comedy colliding with drama in the most unlikely way. De Niro's method acting demanded laser focus, precision, and discipline. Rickles thrived on spontaneity and disruption. Together, they created one of the strangest dynamics in Hollywood, the untouchable serious actor alongside the comic anarchist who lived to knock him off balance. Rickles wasn't there just for easy laughs, though. He carved out a genuine acting career with roles in films like Kelly's Heroes, Enter Laughing, and, of course, Casino. Still, his greatest performance on that set wasn't in the script. It was in the way he managed to rattle Robert De Niro without ever breaking their bond. Don Rickles passed away on April 6, 2017, at the age of 90, leaving behind a career built on making people laugh, often at themselves. Casino remains one of Scorsese's greatest achievements, a sweeping crime epic about power, greed, and downfall, led by a powerhouse cast that included Joe Pesci and Sharon Stone. De Niro's portrayal of Ace Rothstein is still hailed as one of his finest, meticulous, icy, commanding. But behind the camera, another story played out. Don Rickles, whispering insults to one of the most respected actors alive, reminding De Niro and all of us that no one is safe from a perfectly timed put-down. Did you enjoy Don Rickles' comedic style? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and click on the next video shown on your screen. You'll love it.